Humans, welcome to your week ahead tarot and astrology forecast for the week of March 2nd through March 8th. I'm going to get into the usual today. We'll do an overview of the major transits this week, and then we'll turn to the tarot for our 3-card spread. Before I get into it, I want to remind you that my Patreon is active and awesome if you feel like going deeper and getting more, both group and personalized offerings, and you can find the link down below. Also, I published a really rich Venus retrograde guide on the Astrophile Substack, and it is linked in the description below. It's the first link you see down there. So if you want to go deep on Venus retrograde, which is active as of yesterday, and this is our first full week of Venus retrograde, I would highly recommend checking it out. It has both a collective thematic overview of this Venus retrograde in particular. It has reflection questions strewn throughout. It has an overview of the major transits, and then also some tips on how to decode and untangle the more personal themes that this Venus retrograde has in store for you. So go check that out if you're interested in going deeper. I will touch on that in this reading, but I will not give you as expansive an overview as that article does. Okay. Let's get into the astrology for the week of March 2nd through March 8th. So starting off on Sunday, we experience a Mercury-Neptune conjunction at 28, almost 29 degrees of Pisces. And so those of you with really late degree mutable placements will especially feel this one. That's Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. This transit, Mercury conjunct Neptune, can add a quality of dreaminess, confusion, uncertainty. We might have difficulty communicating our ideas with clarity, or we might feel like we're sort of lost in a deluge of information that's coming through both intuitively, but also possibly from fear or from anxiety. Neptune can at times prompt anxiety, and it can sometimes lead to deception. If not like outright intentional deception, more like self-deception or a lack of insight and a lack of ability to sort of tune into the facts and get down to something literal. On the other hand, it can be a transit that's really beautiful for dreaminess, for visualization, for spiritual exploration, and for non-literal things. Mercury in Pisces in itself is not a literal placement. It's not a Mercury that is attuned to the facts and the lines and the truths. It's attuned to the energy and the flow and the sort of spiritual dynamic of the things that we play with and tease apart. And so it's a really beautiful opportunity, if you seize it, to dream something, to make something, to create, to tap into music and poetry and practices that feel, again, less linear and more exploratory or experimental. I would not count on getting the facts today. So if you're looking for answers, you might be disappointed, you might come up short. But this is a moment to open up to your psychic and intuitive senses and to expand, to really immerse yourself in the experience of what is in this moment. Later that day, later Sunday as I'm recording this, we also experienced a sun square to Jupiter. And so the sun is in Pisces as well, and Jupiter is in Gemini. My brain stopped for a moment. The sun in Pisces squared Jupiter in Gemini. We have two mutable players that are forming a 90-degree angle to one another. And so this can be a transit that offers us some socialness, like we might feel more inclined to be social or expressive. But combined with this Mercury-Neptune conjunction, it could feel tiring. It could feel a little bit like zony baloney, or like we're just kind of having trouble like staying on task or doing the thing. Like we might feel like time has a strange quality today, or like moments just stretch out and they're long, or energy fluctuates and kind of goes up and down. But this is a moment to check in with ourselves and ask if we're really like owning our power. And that's maybe kind of a strange thing to say on a, like the mutable signs and sun square Jupiter isn't necessarily like an own your power type transit, but I'm feeling that today because there's some type of story or like identity concept that's almost clashing with a belief. And so you might feel like taking up space and expressing yourself confidently, but then you might come into conflict with a part of yourself that feels more shut down or quiet or small. And that's an opportunity to ask, like, is this authentic to me? Or am I sort of just playing into something that feels familiar, that's maybe getting challenged in this moment? And so both of these are on Sunday, right? And so we begin the week on this note of maybe questioning our beliefs or feeling like a part of ourselves is actually in conflict with deeper beliefs. So on a practical level, that might look like we want to express ourselves. We want to be really honest and forthright. But then there's a part of us that believes that we can't do that because we'll be punished. And so we notice that this inclination we feel is sort of challenged by an underlying belief or maybe a restrictive belief that has confined us in the past. And now I want to back up for a second before I move forward and again acknowledge the fact that Venus is now retrograde. And I talked about this a little bit in my forecast for last week. And again, in that big Venus retrograde article, which you can find below. But this is a charged period. Venus stationed yesterday on Saturday. And today, as I'm recording this, Sunday is our first full day of Venus retrograde. And Venus retrogrades in itself can challenge our beliefs and our values. They can cause us to act out old scripts in relationships, to play into old dynamics, old roles, old relationship patterns and binds that we've found ourselves in before. And when we revert back into old patterns, that's not necessarily a sign that we have regressed or a sign that we have not grown. It's a sign that we're revisiting something from the past so that we can untangle an old dynamic, make a different choice, build more self-awareness, or generally revisit old terrain in order to better understand it. And so if you find yourself falling back into old patterns, especially in relationships or really wherever Aries is in your chart, since that's where Venus currently is, this is a moment to identify what's happening and to ask yourself if that's the role that you want to keep on playing. Because really what this Venus retrograde teases out for us is the invitation that you can show up in a different way. You don't have to keep doing the same thing. It's actually this unconscious process, like, skiing down the same path over and over again, neural pathway stuff, that we keep doing the same thing. Maybe because we haven't even seen what it's like to do something different. Maybe because we're afraid of shaking up dynamics. Maybe because we just haven't been shown how, or because it's comfortable. And what's comfortable is often more appealing than what's challenging, even if what's challenging is more fulfilling. And so this is a definite moment as Venus has literally just stationed. And so we're like right here. Like whatever's coming up right now is going to be a big feature of your Venus retrograde story, right? The station is not like the end of the story. It's actually kind of the beginning. And so whatever's been going on for you, especially in your Aries house and your Pisces house since January 28th, when we entered the pre-retrograde phase, that material is very much up for review, as are prior dates from 8 years ago in 2017 and from 8 years before that in 2009, when we last experienced Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces. And so really observe what's going on. It could be activating. I know I've had an activating experience today that pressed right on my stuff. And I pretty intensely, but at least briefly, fell into this old belief. And I noticed myself doing it, and I noticed myself going small even, and kind of reenacting an old version of myself that had a lot of pain. And that's okay, because I'm not supposed to have that on lock yet, right? It's something that I'm going to be working with and untangling for at least the next 40 days while Venus is retrograde, and probably beyond that too. And so this is a breadcrumb. It's a moment of information that you can utilize as you step forward into this Venus retrograde. So note what's going on, be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, and try to offer yourself grace when you inevitably reanimate pieces of the past, potentially with similar people, if not the same people. Okay, little Venus retrograde spiel concluded. On Monday, Mercury enters Aries. And so we've been experiencing Mercury in Pisces, and again, dreamy, imaginative, poetic. inclined toward romance and fantasy. When Mercury enters Aries, we get more sharply in tune to the spirit, to the fire, to what it is that we want. Aries is ruled by Mars, and so we have this martial Mercury that wants to kind of go after something, and sometimes that something is like conflict or a little spice or fun. It can be a playful placement, but also a sharp placement, and one that can be quite blunt. Whereas coming out of Mercury in Pisces, Pisces is not a blunt energy. It's kind of like, I'm going to swim around this and make it soft. But Mercury in Aries can kind of cut to the chase and get to the point. And so you might notice this shift in your communication, both with other people and perhaps with yourself. Maybe you're feeling more inclined to kind of cut to the chase and get to the facts and say the thing or do the thing. It can be a bit more impulsive and inspired to say something quickly, to do something quickly, to process quickly. And so you might notice some degree of momentum kind of gaining. But again, Mercury is itself building up to a retrograde. And we have 2 more weeks here before Mercury stations retrograde, but that will happen soon. We're also building up to our eclipse window. We're technically kind of in it right now, but the actual eclipse will happen the same day that Mercury stations retrograde on the 15th. And so like double retrograde and eclipse season energy, all between roughly the same degrees of early Pisces, around 10 Pisces, and early Aries, 10 Aries, and back to roughly like 24-ish Pisces. So that's the range of degrees we're working with. Roughly 24 degrees Pisces to roughly like 10, 11 degrees of Aries. And so those active parts of your chart are going to be very loud, not just this week, but moving throughout March and even into April. Those parts of your chart are really deeply in focus. And there's a lot of change occurring there. So paying attention to your Aries and Pisces houses right now and appreciating the storylines that are brewing and doing what you can to tend to yourself and care for yourself through that stuff is the way, okay? On Wednesday, March 5th, the moon enters Gemini, and then we experience Mercury forming a sextile to Pluto. So moon enters Gemini, we have a shift in the way that we're feeling emotionally, the moon having to do with our emotions and our needs. We might feel chattier, sometimes with the Gemini moon, which is ruled by Mercury, now in Aries, right? We are feeling chatty, we're more social, we're more inclined to like consume information. And coming out of Taurus, where we're like creature comforts, like maybe I want to relax and take it slow. When it enters Gemini, we want to process, we want to chat, we want to learn, we want to intake. And that helps us feel alive. So I would honor that and enjoy that if you feel that spark of energy. Also on Wednesday, March 5th, again, Mercury in now Aries forms a sextile to Pluto and Aquarius. This feels quite cathartic to me. It feels like this could be an opportunity to talk through some stuff that's come up for us recently, to process with other people, or even just with ourselves, if it's like a journaling process that we go through, or a reflection process, or a chat with our guides. Like however we do it, this is a moment for us to sink into the opportunity for catharsis. And so this could be important conversations that happen around Wednesday, maybe conversations that bring more light to whatever kind of confusion has been swirling around, especially since our Mercury-Neptune conjunction on Sunday. So this could be a moment where you get some insight and perhaps a bit more clarity off the heels of some confusing weather. Pluto wants us to get down into the raw parts and the raw truths and to let some can't say that on YouTube, to let some stuff go, to release, to let it go, to exhale, and to move through a process of change. And when Mercury is forming a sextile to Pluto, we can bring intention to that. This might look like a cord cutting, or it might look like us going through some type of release process where we like say the thing we need to say, we write the letter and burn it, or we express and get something off our chest. But there is an element here that's like honest. Like we want to get honest and we want to get real. And we really want to get down into the emotional terrain, the subtext, and to like go toward it instead of backing away or avoiding. Possibly a day to examine our hurts and our wounds, and maybe some of the stuff that's holding us back from relating with other people more authentically. On Thursday, March 6th, we have a first quarter moon in Gemini, so that means that the moon is squaring the sun in Pisces. And there's just some push and pull here. Like, on the one hand, it's Pisces season. We're feeling more fluid, more intuitive, more spacey. And then the moon in Gemini, again, is more chatty and intellectual. And so we might be kind of swinging between both and feel the need to kind of change or shift our energy come the 6th. On Friday, March 7th, the moon then enters Cancer. And so we move toward our emotional selves once again. We move toward the sort of like feels. Sometimes moon in Cancer brings the feels. And so we might be chewing on something that has recently come up. We might be wanting more comfort and more care and seeking more gentleness in the way that we tend to ourselves. And then finally, also on March 7th, on Friday, the sun forms a trine to Mars in Cancer. And so Mars in Cancer has just gone direct. I don't know why I'm doing this with my hands, but Mars is now direct in Cancer. And the sun in Pisces forming a trine to Mars in Cancer feels reinforcing. It feels like there is some fluidity to our movement around that, getting into the weekend and the end of the week. We're feeling more intuitively tapped in and more capable of sort of making choices or moving forward from a place of truth or from a place that honors our feelings. And so we might be making choices or just kind of like carrying ourselves in a way that's a bit more self-honoring. And possibly that could offer a little bit of healing. And so if you've been feeling some ouch or if some difficult stuff has come up in this first stretch of the retrograde, this might be a moment where you like let yourself dance it out or cry it out or journal it out or do something to kind of engage your body and your emotions in a way that feels more like fluid. And that will help. So I'd seize that opportunity and maybe exhale something in the process if you can. Give yourself space to do that. Okay, turning over to our tarot spread for this week. To start, our anchor card for the week of March 2nd through March 8th is the King of Swords. And the King of Swords, connected to air signs, often people associate it with Gemini. It doesn't have to be, though. We've also got Libra and Aquarius in mind. The King of Swords in this deck is called the Throne of Knowledge. And this King of Swords is holding a drill and standing in this sort of authoritative position. And they're interestingly at the edge of a dock. And so there's water behind them, and we can see these like structures that are lining what looks like a river. And we got the moonlight in the background. And so we've got this like, interestingly in this deck, we've got this hint at emotion that's here, right? We have water that's flowing in the background. We have the moon also connected to water. And yet the King of Swords is swords. It's air. It is not water. Typically, we don't see the sort of like watery emotive energy with air and with swords in particular, but it's emphasized in this card because there is a sort of precision or boundary that the King of Swords has to create between them and their emotions. And so it's not that the King of Swords is emotionless or even necessarily cold, although they can definitely come across that way. It's often that they're very compartmentalized. And so they've got feelings, but you just can't see them. They're standing there and they've got their drill and they're like, I'm going to do the thing. I have the tool. I'm going to do something functional and literal and practical. And maybe I'm going to use my words or my mind as a tool in order to make something or even fix something. And so this King of Swords is defined. They're self-defined, and they're kind of like ignoring their emotions. And that might be something that you're either like feeding into this week. Maybe you're playing the role of King of Swords, or maybe someone else is. The King of Swords can be a little cutthroat sometimes and kind of detached to the point of not seeming like there's a whole lot going on in here. And that can be a tough energy, especially if you are a watery person or someone who has strong feelings and is quite emotive and expressive. Sometimes King of Swords energy can be pretty activating. It can be like the person that seems like deadpan or aloof or inaccessible. And so this is coming up as our anchor card this week. So there's something that we're working with here around maybe energy in other people that sets us off, or even the way that we might at times kind of shut down our emotions or say no to them. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Sometimes we have to compartmentalize. We can't like bring our full emotional selves to every situation in every chapter of our life. Sometimes it serves us a bit to have more separation and to be able to show up more rationally. And sometimes it really hurts us, and we need to be able to tap into the heart more. And that's really what the King of Swords needs when they fall out of whack and they become cold and cut off and distant and aloof and detached. They need to find a way to go back to the heart and marry it with the mind. And so that might be sort of an intro lesson for us this week about this Venus retrograde journey, is where are we sort of dishonoring our hearts in service of our minds? And maybe vice versa too. Where do we sometimes like our heart might at times kind of lead us into sticky territory that like we rationally know is not good for us, but we have the yearning, right? The heart wants what the heart wants. And so you might be playing with that polarity this week, and it's very possible that other people around you are too, or maybe there's like one central figure who's showing up in King of Swords energy that is really featuring strongly in this week. For our challenge, we have Judgment. Judgment is traditionally connected to the planet Pluto, and in this deck, they associate it with Aries and Mars, which is interesting. But we see what looks like a riot. There is like a revolution of sorts that's happening, a protest, and we see like people climbing up on a building and like putting up a banner. We see ACAB featured prominently on someone's bandana. We see Black Lives Matter. We see a cross through NYPD. And so there's like revolutionary energy that's showing up in this Judgment card. This is the Next World Tarot. I don't know if I mentioned that. So it is kind of a revolutionary deck at its core. But this challenge in particular is maybe for us to step up and step out. Maybe in a way it's a judgment call on something that is not acceptable. It's like setting a boundary or making a choice and saying like, middle finger to that. I really wish I could cuss on YouTube. Very unnatural for me to stifle it. Anyway, so we see this challenge. We see these people rising up and saying no and owning their power. And so this call this week is probably for us to rise up in a way and to challenge a structure and to say no more and to resist and to use our voices and maybe like take stock of what needs to change in order for us to move forward. So this could apply collectively, personally, probably both, maybe in our personal lives, or also the way that we're sort of stepping up and speaking out against something that is not okay. That could very much be the moment. Sometimes, like more often for me, Judgment is more about taking stock of our own choices, but I'm diverging from that meaning because of the fact that I'm using this deck in particular and it has a very different energy to it. So it feels like we're taking stock of some other stuff that's not okay. For our gift, we have the Six of Swords reversed. So really interesting gift, and I think this actually showed up in last week's reading too. This gift, the keyword here is passage, and this is a Mercury and Aquarius card. A gift this week could be getting stalled out from forward progress. The Six of Swords upright is about us moving past a difficult period or moving on. We see people like getting in a boat and traveling across water. And so sometimes it's about like literal physical travel. More often it's about us kind of deciding we want to move on and make peace with something and go forward and move on to a new horizon that promises less turmoil. Now, when it's in reversed, sometimes we're stopped or halted from making that kind of progress, and we have to kind of tread water or stay in place, at least briefly, to either put something right or to achieve some degree of closure or to re-examine something that's happened because we don't have all the information we need, or we just have not, things are not in place and something needs to be looked at more closely before we can make that progress and take that step forward. So it's very retrograde vibe. Six of Swords reversed is big retrograde energy. We are potentially revisiting the past. Potentially we are re-examining a choice that we've made and asking ourselves if it's aligned for us, or we're generally just like taking a hard look at what's coming up. And this also plays into Judgment. And so although I said this was less likely to be like personal reflection, paired with the Six of Swords reversed, I can see it very much being that too. So maybe the gift and the challenge are working together this week, in that whatever exploration we do, whatever sort of digging up process we do this week is going to be generative for us. And it's worth taking your time, and it's worth being honest, and it's worth approaching it with an open heart, tending to yourself, showing up compassionately as you dig up some material that needs to be dug up and looked at. Right? It is time. It is retrograde season. It is time to look at the past with more honest eyes. And it's time to ask ourselves if we truly feel aligned with the direction that we're headed in. And that is all I have for you this week. Thank you for watching. As always, if you found this helpful, please do like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you want to join me over on Patreon for more goodies, go check it out. It's worth it. Have a good week.